Hello and welcome to you for joining us today on the AI and Leadership Short Course. I am Dr. Toyosi Loye, and I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Alex Fenton. We're joining you and we're coming to you from the School of Computer and Engineering Sciences at the University of Chester. And we've been taking you through some courses in the past couple of weeks. This week is the third week, and I'm joined here with also one of my colleagues, Dr. Joe Collinet. I will allow each of the members of my team here to introduce themselves. For me, I am the deputy head of School of Computer and Engineering Sciences. And Alex, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hello. Hopefully, people know who I am by now, Toyosi, but I'm Dr. Alex Fenton. I'm Associate Dean International for our faculty and Associate Professor. And Joe?
I'm Dr. Joe Collinet, and I'm a lecturer here at the University of Chester, and I do specialisms in different types of AI.
Fantastic. Thank you, Joe, so much for joining us today. We look forward to your presentation in a short while. But before we do that, Toyosi, can you believe we're on session 3 already? It's gone quickly, hasn't it?
Yes, we are midway into the entire course. Yeah.
Absolutely. So this session 3 is all about AI and security. But usually at Toyosi, we talk a little bit about what's going on at the university. And we know the people that participate in these sessions like to know a little more about Chester. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. Before we do that, just a quick reminder to people that they can register for free if they've not done so already, and that gives access to the learning management system where all the materials, videos are on there. There's going to be 5 one-hour sessions between July and September, so we're taking a little break in August. Obviously, all the sessions live streamed and recorded to Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. So don't worry if we had a couple of people last week saying, "Oh, where's session 2 video?" You can find all those videos on our channels, and those channels are linked obviously through the website, which is just listed on the top left there. So before we delve into Joe's session and into the idea of security, Toyosi, we were going to just talk through a few things. The universities, our researchers, academics, and teams are working on some really interesting AI research, teaching, knowledge exchange, etc. So you had a couple of really interesting examples from your school. Can you talk us through that, please, Toyosi?
Yes, thank you very much, Alex. Yeah, at the School of Computer and Engineering Sciences, we're currently carrying out research around the topic of AI persuasion. In the past weeks, one of the things we've talked about is the ethics that surround the use of AI for carrying out different tasks. And for the research aspect, we're looking at how AI can be persuaded, for example, to carry out things like maybe developing malware or even actually carrying out some things that it wouldn't have done on the normal time, on the normal usage. And these are part of the research that I and my colleagues are carrying out, particularly trying to combine AI with cybersecurity, seeing how AI may be able to even generate malware, which are one of the things of concern when using AI. And also recently, my colleague, Dr. Joe, has actually carried out a research and has about to be published work around the designing value aligned traffic agents through conflict sensitivity. And yeah, Joe, can you tell us a bit about that paper?
Yeah, sure. So essentially, we're looking at traffic agents. So these are essentially self-driving cars. And we're looking at when 2 or more self-driving cars have some sort of conflict. It's usually in their goals. So they both want to go to the same place, but you don't want to crash, things like that.
Yeah.
And it's about how we can use things such as values. So things like, the car has some value system which you can use to resolve those conflicts. So things like there's a high value for not wanting to crash, but there's perhaps different values for fuel usage, comfort, speed, those sorts of things, and balancing those things out to try and resolve any possible conflicts between goals with these traffic agents, and then how we can integrate all those things together and hopefully get some self-driving cars that drive a little bit more neatly.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. So in addition to all of these, for students at the undergraduate as well as the postgraduate level, we have modules across the programs that actually cover the topics of AI. And also students can carry out projects at their final year, particularly the undergraduate students in their final year, and the postgraduate students as well can carry out projects around the topic of AI. Thank you. Over to you, Alex.
That's great, Toyosi. Yeah, absolutely. At Chester, we are really good, I think, at joining up dots between the research, knowledge exchange, and teaching as well. So, creating those projects. Last week, we mentioned the 2-year master's route as well, Toyosi. So, again, both for undergraduate and postgraduate, as you say, there's opportunities there to get involved with things. So, there's a couple of other things going on at the university. There's a lot of interesting work happening internally, to kind of, I know your school's working on sort of AI education for the wider, staff and student body as well, in terms of us upskilling and having our policies in place. But some of the external work that we do, for example, we have an annual conference, which is not just internal, but welcomes people from all over the country to talk about AI in education as well. So this is the AI Education Conference, looking at how education professionals can harness the potential of AI. And we hosted that at the university this year, and last year was in London. We're also publishing things like textbooks. This one you can see in the middle, the Strategic Digital Transformation, which has just been published. And obviously, as you may imagine, there's a significant aspect of AI and other kind of disruptive technologies and how those might be applied strategically. And then a couple of other projects. We're quite often kind of in the news for doing cutting edge research, like the things that Joe mentioned. Then there's another one there. Some of our researchers have combined satellite data with AI to study the environmental impact of the LA wildfires, for example. So really trying to make sort of real world projects that, as you say, Toyosi, our students can get involved with as well. So that's all good. So just a quick reminder, we're taking a bit of a break in August, and we'll be back for session 4, AI and Transformation Case Studies, on the 1st of September with Professor Bin Yang, Dora Moldovan, who's Chief AI Officer at Tomorrow Group, and Adam Worrell's going to be talking about optimizing AI for smart embedded systems. And then session 5 is going to be on the 9th of September with Dr. Sufian and Professor Catherine Welsh. So quick reminder as well, once you've completed the sessions and the quiz, you'll be eligible to get this free certificate through the learning management system, but you have to register. So that was it, Toyosi, for the opening part. I think now we can hand over to Joe. Is that okay, Joe?
Yep, that's fine. Just Fantastic. Let me know when you're ready.
Thank you very much. I'll just take us off the screen.
Sure, okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about AI data and a little bit on security. It's not going to be too in depth. It's going to be quite a high level brief talk. So we're looking at AIs from the creation perspective. So, creating your own AI models and things like that. And so we're going to have a look at where do we get the data to train these AIs from, and why are we training these AIs? What are we trying to get them to do? And then having a look at, well, we've made this AI. What are the possible outcomes that this AI can do? But we're also going to have a quick look at the third-party perspective. So it's things like using someone else's AI model. It's typically how the wider public are going to be using these sorts of models. I don't anticipate users creating their own AI models for everyday use. And in general, all the images you're about to see are generated automatically by MS Copilot, just for a bit of fun. There's a couple of images that might not be from MS, but they'll be stated about where those images have come from. Okay, so AI, there's lots of different types of AI. So when the buzzword of AI comes up these days, it's generally referring to machine learning or generative AI, those sorts of things. But AI is wider than that. There's lots of different types. And with the image on there, that's the Microsoft's image generating having its best guess at what other types of AI are. I wouldn't overly rely on what it says there. And so generally the stuff I'm going to be going over is going to focus mainly on this generative AI, but large parts of it are going to be applicable to machine learning. So when you're taking these sorts of machine learning generative AI models, you need lots and lots of data. So it's things that you want to train on. So the next thing you need to think about is, well, where do we actually get this data from? Since we need huge amounts of it, typically what people have done previously is they've just scraped the internet for the data. So that's just going onto the internet, pulling everything. And there's some particular issues with that approach. So typically copyright issues. But if you're a big business with lots of American funding, then these copyright issues magically disappear typically. But they still have issues with data quality. So with the amounts of data that they're pulling and scraping off the internet, there isn't any real possibility of making sure that this data is actually any good, because you need someone human to go over and just make sure everything looks okay. But with the huge amounts, that's not possible. And it's the same thing with correctness. So you've pulled all this data. Is this data actually accurate or true? And because it's the internet, a lot of it isn't going to be right or true. But this still gets put into our models to be trained on. So if we don't want to take a scraping the internet approach, then we can just try and find some way of either making the data ourselves or going out and making that data. And there's some other issues with this. It tends to be like, well, how legal is it for me to capture this data? So I think OpenAI have some new microphone thing that they're trying to sell. And a large reason why they're doing that is to get more data. So if they can capture conversations, that can be used for training. And because it's with humans, it becomes very natural. And so that moves a little bit into what I mean by validating the data set. So it's this checking, making sure that all the data we've got is a better quality, which is a little bit easier if we're curating this data set ourselves. So moving on to the next slide. So we've got all this data and we're trying to create an AI model. Ideally, we want to know what this AI model is trying to do. So why are we doing this? So with generative AI, there's usually some sort of wide, it needs to be a general purpose. It will respond naturally, things like that. One of the issues with having these very wide AIs is that, well, how do you know if it's any good? And that's very tricky to do. So for user studies, that's where we get some users to use this model that we've created. Typically, that's very expensive, especially once you need to get large amounts of people. And it's tricky to get people to involved in this sort of work. And then once you do get people in to work on evaluating these models, how do we actually quantify it? So you have a group of people, and let's say 60% of them said, yes, fine. That doesn't really mean a huge amount when we're trying to say whether this AI model is any good or not. So we could take a different approach where we curate some test suites so we can have a better way of quantifying what our results are going to be for this model. But it's tricky to make a suite that encompasses every single variation, mainly because of the difficulties in knowing what this AI is going to produce. And that should lead me on to my next slide. So we've got this AI is producing some stuff. Now, say we've moved it into the real world. Do we want to include the new data that we get in our training? So essentially, we put the AI out there and it learns as it goes along. This was tried once by Microsoft with Microsoft Tay, which lasted for, I think, a good 3 hours before they needed to bring it back down. So because they didn't know, well, what's the possible outputs of this particular AI? What's it going to do? And when you've got this new training data that you don't know anything about, your possible outcomes are going to increase. And it's not always possible to even figure out how many possible outcomes there are. So if we're trying to limit the possible outcomes, because either for some sort of security issues or ethical issues, what you can do is say, okay, well, my AI can only pick from some list of possible outcomes. But obviously, when you want a general AI, you don't want just pre-appended lists of everything. So another approach is say, okay, well, I've generated something, but I'm not going to give you the answer until someone's had a chance to have a look to make sure that the response is okay. Generally, this isn't done because people don't like delays on these sorts of things. And so what a lot of the big players will do is that they have another AI which checks the output and decides whether this output should be outputted or not. So it's used in things like ChatGPT, the Microsoft Copilot, and things like that. So when we're thinking about, okay, not just models that we made, there's lots and lots of models out there that people are already using. So things like Copilot, ChatGPT, etc. So when we're thinking about AI from a security perspective, what we need to understand is, okay, well, what are these companies doing with our data? So if I give ChatGPT some prompt, what happens with that text that I gave it? Or if I wanted to look over and reword something of mine, well, what's it going to do with that data? And when we're using these sorts of models, it'll be nice to know that what they're outputting is actually reliable. Unfortunately, that's not always the case that we can guarantee any reliability. Okay, so once we've sent our prompt over, there's the issues of, okay, well, where is this thing being processed? Especially from the security point of view with things like GDPR and other data security laws that generally we have in Europe, we need to know where this prompt's being processed. And Microsoft are pushing this Copilot for Business, where they think they're guaranteeing that your data is going to stay within a certain data block, but it would take a lawyer to go through all those privacy policies that they use to see if that would actually generally be the case for us. And when we're trying to guarantee this processing location, because if, for example, the data goes to the US has a lot less strict data processing rules. And so anything that is put onto a US server is open for use for the US government and things like that, which we may not want to have for our particular prompts. And the main issue in terms of these sorts of third-party models is they don't have any guarantees on what the output is any good. So they can't say, okay, well, we're going to be mostly accurate. They just say, we don't know. It's up to you to try and figure out whether what we've given you is any good or not, which isn't always an ideal case. And so I thought for the discussion, we'll probably have a think about things like, where are we getting this data? Is that important? And discussions around, okay, well, how do we say we want a model to do something? So does a model want to have this wide range, this generative AI where you can just type lots of text? Is that the best way forward, or is it better to have a slightly more focused AI? And in terms of security, I was thinking more along the lines of we're using other companies' third-party models. What are they doing with this data? And lastly, it'd be, well, how reliable are these results that we're getting from AI? Because we know, particularly in machine learning and generative AI, they're not going to be 100% accurate. And that's partially by design in terms of its training process. It needs to get things wrong, so it knows how to get things right in the later stage. And that's part of its learning process. So I think that's the end of my quick talk. Hope that was all okay.
It's really great, that, Joe. It's lots of interesting talking points out of that one. I would like to ask our audience if they've got any questions. I've certainly got a few. Toyosi, have you got any questions for Joe at all? Would you like me to lead off?
Yes, I have a question, but yeah, if you want to lead off, I can wait for yours. Yeah.
No, you go for it, Toyosi.
Okay, so thank you very much. Thanks, Joe, for the presentation. And I was just listening to your discussion about the data security and how data can be processed in different locations. So I'm looking at it from the cybersecurity perspective, and I'm asking for when you have the new trained data that you're passing to the AI, and you may, from what you said, there may be instances where the data get processed in different locations, different countries, and these countries also have their own GDPR, or they have their own policies that cover or actually manage data policies. How can we manage? How can we ensure that there is adherence to these policies and avoid possible data breach? I know that in the past week we talked about this, about how that there's a possibility of data breaches when data has been passed to AI. So from your perspective, how can this be managed?
It depends on how much you trust the company. And by and large, I don't trust large American companies with data security. So I would say that there is no way you can guarantee data security within these companies. I mean, I did have a quick look through this Copilot for Business, where they say they'll guarantee this. It'll stay within the EU, and but I saw some unusual things about, well, to guarantee uptime, they may send it over to the US at some points. So it would need perhaps a lawyer to go up and say, okay, well, you said this, when would this happen? So when would we know when you have decided to move to a US server? Things like that.
Yeah. So does this mean that going further, does it mean that we just have to be careful with the handling of the data and how much of the data we're passing out, provided
yeah,
that
yeah, by and large, it's going to be, well, trust it as much as you trust the early internet.
Yeah.
So, when I was being brought up on the internet, it was said you should never put your real name online. You should never put card details. You never should put your address. And then obviously things like YouTube, you signed up for a YouTube account and it would say never ever use your real name. And then Google bought it out and said you have to now use your real name and please can I have a picture of you. Things like that. So it's essentially how much you trust these large companies. In my personal opinion, it's not the wisest course of action, but there's not a lot we can do about it.
That's a really interesting point, isn't it? And I think, we think all these services are free, but actually we're paying with our data, aren't we, in the end? I mean, I think with Facebook, I think they calculated with all the billions of users, each user's worth like $150 or something. So we don't always, people don't really read all the small print and the terms and conditions. So we're not 100% sure what we're signing up for, or indeed, you mentioned about the law as well, Joe, and it, the law seems to be kind of 2 steps behind with these things, doesn't it? As we're creating situations that the law was never designed for, and these large companies have got small staff of humans, and it's not really in their interest to start regulating themselves. So if their goal is to make money in the end, then that's where the boundaries get blurred. So just wondered if you've got any thoughts on the way we, perhaps need to be looking at AI in terms of the, what should, governments, policy be doing in order to rein in these large companies?
Well, the main issue is that for lots of these large companies, they are in essence stateless. They don't really belong to a particular country, and so there's no real way for a government to regulate them. It's possible the US might be able to regulate, say, OpenAI or something eventually, if they really wanted to. But then there'll be the next country where there'll be more lax laws, and then these big companies will come up from there. I think it's more a case of you're just going to have to get used to it. There's no real ways for the governments to regulate a lot of this stuff. It's similar with encryption. You can try and regulate encryption, but there's just a mathematical formula. Once it's out there, it's out there. There's no real stopping it. I don't know if that's a positive.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I mean, the other thing, I suppose, about governments regulating, if these large companies are making vast sums of money, and then obviously with that wealth, you can hire great lawyers, and you can also make large contributions to political parties as well, can't you? So I suppose that the idea of kind of self-regulation of societies starts to become blurry, doesn't it? If these companies are then supporting political parties and working with them in that way, then the independence is a little lost, isn't it? I guess.
Yeah, I mean that's true for any large company. It's not just AI companies that do this sort of thing.
Sure. No.
Yeah. Can I ask you something else, Joe?
Yeah.
So given the current situation and the fact that we have to wait for government to put the laws into place and try to check where the gaps and loopholes are, what can users do? So talking of what boundaries would you recommend as far as data is concerned?
Well, I'd say this for the internet in general, not just AIs, but it's unless you're happy for everyone to know it, don't put it up.
Yeah.
Because it's recorded somewhere, someone's got access to it, and there's always the potential that it'll get leaked. So unless you're happy, so for example, things like if you wanted to reword your document for you, as long as you're happy for everyone else to read that document before it's been reworded, then it's probably not the best idea. So for day-to-day stuff, it's largely not going to be too much of an issue. You want some paragraph, it's trivial, it doesn't really matter too much. But for businesses and people with things that they want to keep secret, by and large, it's trying to steer away anything that's going to touch what you're trying to keep secret. But it's going to be a case of trying to train the people that are working there on how to use these things and telling them that you can't just upload our payroll system or our payroll Excel spreadsheet and say, okay, well, are there any problems in this Excel spreadsheet for us? Things like that.
So I guess as a leader, manager, if you're, a leader in an organization or a lecturer or somebody in some position of power as well, you've got to take the security side into account. I mean, certainly at our university, Joe, we had to kind of rapidly start to create policies and procedures. Once these tools get into the hands of general users, you've got to start almost as an organization creating policies, procedures, training in order to be able to navigate these waters. And as you say, I think there's a perception that you mentioned earlier that firstly, the output of say for example, if you're using ChatGPT or DeepSeek, there's a perception that everything that comes back is pretty much accurate. Our colleague Professor Michael Isaac just published a paper recently on this topic, and what he found was that a large majority of users, when they're using these tools, felt that the results that were accurate. So obviously not everybody's an expert. So if you're asking these models and assuming that it's correct, you've got a problem with accuracy, and equally, as you say, a problem with security as well. So I suppose as a leader, Joe, what else should leaders take into account when it comes to AI? I suppose not just for ChatGPT, but if there's other, that's perhaps the most visible thing that we're seeing at the moment. But as you quite rightly know, AI is a much wider field as well, isn't it?
Yeah, so with the AI stuff, so when you have machine learning and generative AIs, whatever companies are making them, you can't make guarantees about their behavior, which is where the inaccuracies come from. Whereas other types of AI, so a lot of rules-based systems, you can make guarantees about outcomes, and you can do proofs and things like that. But those aren't the fancy AIs that people want to use these days. But in terms of people using these things, it's you really need to just double check everything you get out of it. So if it says that something is true, just go and double check in a book somewhere and make sure that it is true.
Yeah.
I also recall, from just to add to what Joe has suggested, that when we hosted Steve last week, he mentioned how that as much as they are applying AI to some of the aspects of their task, they also have the human in the loop, because definitely the check still have to come in along the line to ensure the reliability and the correctness of the outcome. I think that is something we really have to put into consideration, particularly in leadership and general use of AI tools.
Yeah, so human in the loop, where essentially you have human double check everything that it outputs. The only real issue is that it's a lot slower. People tend to be a lot slower than these AI machines. So I suspect there will be the more conscientious companies who will do this sort of thing. And there'll be others who will say, well, we'll just trust it and we'll take, if it goes wrong, we'll fix it then. But it depends on how you want to approach it.
That's interesting. You mentioned about training data sets and bias as well, Joe. I mean, this is a big challenge, isn't it, for AI and trade? I suppose it's only as good as the training data set and the algorithm, isn't it? So we are seeing, bias of some of these algorithms to a certain extent. So I wonder if you've got any thoughts on that.
Yeah, so since these data sets are huge and you can't curate them, they're going to have whatever biases that exist, and because it's the internet, you'll have every bias. I mean, it's just part and parcel of the entire internet. Is you're going to get all thoughts of humanity, and that includes all the biases. And it's impossible to curate these training data sets. They're too large. You can't work with them. It's not usable, and so it's very difficult to try and find biases in the actual data itself. And so it's just essentially being aware that there might be some of these biases in the output. And a lot of these third-party ones, they always try to essentially give you the answer you're looking for, and to try and keep you happy.
Yeah, I think that's problematic, isn't it? And with the the visible tools like Gen AI, ChatGPTs, etc. as well, it really is trying to please you, because obviously in the end what it wants you to do is subscribe. And so by and it's quite interesting, if you get a result and you call it out and say that's inaccurate, it actually comes back and apologizes and goes, yeah, sorry, I realise now I did it wrong. I did it like this. I should have done it like this. But really, it should be giving you those kind of caveats up front, shouldn't it? But as you say, if they're designed to, if the ultimate goal is to get you to subscribe, it's just trying to please you all the time. And I suppose for the majority of users, they will just take it as read that that's correct. It was interesting actually this week talking to my son, who's is almost 16. But I said, how much are you using these tools? He said, all the time. He said, but the thing is, it's often coming back with things that are inaccurate. And I thought, well, that's great. If as a teenager, he's able to have that awareness.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of people out there, whether it's social media or AI, that are taking these things as read without, as you say, Joe, fact checking it against other sources, against books, etc. as well. So I suppose it's probably up to us as educators, and this should start from an early age as well, to build that critical awareness in starting off with our children. What do you think, Toyosi?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that, because generally people may tend to accept results without cross-checking, particularly people who are not so knowledgeable in the basics and the development of AI itself as a tool. I think it's important, similar to the way we make our users aware of the internet, of general cyber awareness. I think the AI side also has to come in. So I think that's something we need to take as critical as we take other awarenesses for, in terms of general IT or computer usage.
I mean, there was a report in schools some years ago in the UK saying that, the IT education wasn't fit for purpose, and obviously the governments have kind of started to jump onto that, and our Labour government in this country are kind of using AI now and having photographs of politicians in front of supercomputers and trying to show what they're behind it. But I mean, in some ways, that's good. But as Joe quite rightly points out, these things have been around for a long time, and it's not just the visible. ChatGPTs and others have made those things more visible, but these things have been around for a long time, kind of controlling things in the background. We've got a great question actually here from Volkan, actually, which I'm going to put on the screen. He's saying, with the rise of generative AI and personalized recommendation systems, what safeguards should be in place to prevent the manipulation of individuals' beliefs, behaviors, or decision-making processes? Joe, I wonder if you could take that one for us.
Yeah, sure. So the answer is it will be extremely difficult. I suspect governments will probably try to put some sort of regulations in, but it's only as much as you can trust the company to implement these sorts of things. So I would say you'd probably need to be aware that it will try and manipulate you at some point, especially if you're using a lot of these companies. It's working out, well, what does this company actually want from me, which can be tricky to find out. There isn't any real safeguards that you can implement that would guarantee that these things won't happen.
I suppose that, in terms of safeguards, obviously you would hope that it's done at the company end, but obviously, as you say, Joe, it depends on what the goals of that company are. A lot of these companies are profit-based, and that obviously then, blurs the boundaries in terms of those guardrails. Then you would hope, obviously, governments and countries would put up the guardrails, but again, is it always in their interests? Are they, to what extent, what relationship have they got with those companies? And then I suppose it then becomes at the organisational end. If you work for particularly a larger organisation, having your policies, procedures in place, training for staff, etc., and even smaller companies, investing in training for staff as well. And then I suppose at the individual level, trying to upskill yourself about the safeguards and so forth as well, isn't it? So then I suppose it becomes kind of multi-faceted, doesn't it? But in the end, as you say, Joe, even with those things in place, it's really difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, it'll be extremely difficult to guarantee that won't be happening.
Yeah, no, definitely. There's a lot in that. Go on, Toyosi.
Yeah, I also think the way technology is evolving may be a bit of a challenge to the way we are catching up with the policies and safeguarding and every other measure we're putting in place to protect individuals and to protect the data. I think while we are waiting to catch up with that, it's up to the system, it's up to the individual. So if it's an individual use, then the individual has to be able to know the boundaries. But when we have systems like you mentioned before, Alex, then the system or the organization has to put specific policies in place to be able to manage it. And these are things that we already have occurring in other aspects of technology. So, for example, the internet, browsing, and all of these other things within a particular organization, the organization has the responsibility to make sure that the usage is within certain policies, accepted boundaries. I think that is, for now, I think that's where we may be tending towards until we have a more robust solution to this.
It's very true that, and as these new technologies come along rapidly and develop rapidly, organisations have got to respond quickly, haven't they? And then obviously develop that over time. So we're going to get Professor Catherine in one of the next sessions, who's led on some of those policies and training for Chester as well. So we'll get a bit of a view from her. But just the last bit of Volkan's question, the kind of sociologist in me as well, I think with that question, it makes me think about that manipulation of individuals' beliefs, behaviours, etc. I mean, there was a good example I read recently about a situation that Facebook created in terms of its algorithm. So the algorithm was designed to maximize views. So what that meant in practice in this particular case was amplifying content of sort of extremist hate content, which created a really nasty situation of and in the end, people lost their lives. So if algorithms are set to maximize the amount of views, I mean, from Facebook's perspective, well, that's kind of, of course we want to maximize views because our shareholders will be happy, our advertisers will be happy, but by that then manipulating individuals' beliefs and behaviors, in the end, information, it doesn't have to be true or accurate, does it? It just needs to, in the end, it's whatever people believe, and people will believe a good story. So if the algorithm's set to maximize views and that's promoted, in the end, the algorithm was actually putting on screen and auto-playing extremist content without, so there's no balanced view. The algorithm didn't say, make sure we give a balanced view of this, or downplay things that encourage violence, for example. And this is the challenge that we've got, isn't it? As coming back to Joe's point about, profit making and ethics, it becomes very, very blurry, doesn't it, as we navigate these territories. I think as well, the other thing from a sociological point of view is the idea that we potentially rogue governments could utilize some of these tools in a way that would allow them to observe other citizens in society in a way that we haven't been able to do that so in the past. And we've seen examples of kind of totalitarian governments over time and utilizing humans to be able to monitor what's going on and enforce kind of strict rules. But for the first time ever, we've got potentially computers and algorithms that are going to be doing these things and actually changing what we're doing. So I think it really is important to be having these discussions and to try and make sure that we are aware of the security aspects and the fact that potentially these algorithms could manipulate individuals' beliefs and behaviors. So I think it's an important point. We've got another point which isn't exactly AI related from Afwan Toyosi, and this is about study at Chester. So he's asking about how many classes per week for BSc students. I don't know if you could pick that one up, Toyosi.
Yeah, thank you. So Afwan, we have a varying number of classes for our students. So we have, depending on the level of study that the student is, it may vary, and also depending on the modules that they're taking for that year and for the term. So for example, in the coming academic year, we're going to start, we've adopted a new academic framework that actually helps us to streamline the number of days as well as the hours that the students are going to be having to attend the classes. So that reasonably may help students to cover most of the classes within 2 or 3 days within the week. So, and again, that also depends on the level of study as well as the modules, the combination of modules, as well as the options. So at some stages, some levels, students will have to select optional courses, and those also will inform what exactly they're going to take for the classes. So on the average, maybe if I pick the level 4 students, for example, they may expect at least 2 or 3 days but within those 3 days, there will be maybe a certain number of hours, again, depending on the set and the category of classes that they are joining.
Thanks, Phil. So, yeah, so it's going to vary depending on the course and the year that you're in of study. But I think what we try to do at Chester is design these programs, as you say, with the new academic framework, so that there's time for self-study. And we know that a lot of our students are working as well. So to try and account for that, we've tried to structure that in a way that works. Afwan's asking about orientation day as well. I suppose that'll be for undergraduate as well, Toyosi. Do we have a day for that?
The specific day I can't say yet, but it usually occurs for the first couple of weeks at the beginning of the academic year. And so by not having a specific date, there are a series of events that are carried out within those weeks. And the specific one, maybe the orientation day, what you meant by orientation day is the induction. We have a specific day where you get to meet the lecturers, you get to meet the school, and then you get to be introduced to the program and other activities and structure within the school. So it's around for the coming year, it's around the September, middle of September or thereabout.
Thanks, Toyosi. So really happy Professor Marianne Hardy has been able to join us from University of Durham. Maz, thank you so much for joining us. That should probably bring us back around to talking about the topic of the day, Maz, which is AI and security. And I know you and I have done kind of research on these topics as well. So thank you for joining us, Maz, and sorry to put you on the spot immediately. But I suppose we've just been talking about the rise of Gen AI and recommendation systems and what safeguards should be in place, etc. as well. I've heard you talk in other forums about some of these things, Matt. So I wonder if you could give us your views on what we should be doing, as leaders and individuals to try and navigate these new waters.
Yeah, of course. Okay, sincere apologies for being late, and thank you so much for welcoming me. Yes, AI. Gosh, it's a bit loaded, isn't it, in terms of education? So I use it. I know my students use it. It is a tangled web of interesting divergence and a sandpit in terms of its tool base. It's also a hellscape in terms of its, biases and potential misinformation and disinformation. There's a lot going on in the background in terms of sort of policy change and regulation at the level of sort of education input. So what does it mean to have academic standards around AI, and how can we actually support faculty and students to use it in a way that is helpful and doesn't, recreate additional biases, etc. So stop me if I go off piece, but just to kind of give one example of this, there's a project at the moment that I'm doing at Durham, which is, with some postgrad students and some members of faculty. And we're looking at decolonizing the curriculum because that's very on point at the moment. And what we have, the whole genesis of this project came out because we observed there was a strong set of different experiences from faculty and students in the use of AI and the reactions of sort of their peers or colleagues around them, whether they were international students or UK home-based students or international faculty or UK home-based faculty, right? And UK-based people had the experience of, oh, you're using AI. Oh, that's interesting. Please tell me more about how you use that. International people generally had the experience of, you're using AI. Oh, well, you can't be very good then. And we're immediately kind of squashed down. Since then, through the project, there have been, shared lived experiences of, like review processes, for example. So the scenario of a thesis advisory panel or a review panel for a PhD student, and speculation about whether that student has used AI in the appropriate way. And what we found, unsurprisingly, is there has been far greater scrutiny of international students than there have UK home-based students in terms of that use. So I think we're right to be cautious around sort of the security and safeguards of the actual tools that we're using. I think at the moment, there is a degree of unreadiness in terms of the culture of education and sort of how prepared we are within education to actually support people using it in the right way, whatever the right way is, right? Because not only does the technology replicate those points of bias, but we're doing it ourselves. And that's pretty bad. Yeah, I don't know what other people think about that.
It's really interesting, Maz. I mean, something that came up at our AI education conference as well is, well, a couple of things. Firstly, whether students are, in terms of their AI literacy and their ability to use the tools, if you are, a premium subscriber to some of these services, and you've got the finances and the know-how, within your network. I mean, these are classic sort of sociological, educational things, aren't they? If you're from a particular background, you're more likely to succeed within a background that's led by, the same type of person, I guess.
Yep.
And that goes, very true for AI and AI literacy, isn't it, to a certain extent? So would anybody agree with that statement as well? I mean, there was a bit of a debate about this, because some of our audience was saying, actually, if you use something like DeepSeek, you can use the free version, and that's as good as a paid version of something else. So therefore, maybe it levels the playing field. But I just wondered if anyone else had any thoughts on that.
Yeah. Thanks, Maz, for joining us. So I think prior to your joining us today, we talked a bit about how that it's actually up to the system, it's up to the individual to be able to draw the boundaries. So one of the things that Joe mentioned was the reliability of the outcome of whatever it is that we're getting from the AI in itself. I think we still have to take up the responsibility as humans to be able to understand how far is too much, how much is too much, and be able to draw the boundaries. By all means, as much as the use of AI fortifies the extent or the effort that we're applying to be able to carry out research, I think we cannot take out the human in the loop. We must always try to find that place where the humans are able to manually check things. I think that way we're able to get something more reliable outcomes that we can actually carry on for further research and for further use. We've talked a lot about that earlier today, and how that it's important for the system. So we've actually asked the question of whether or not we have laws or policies in place that actually guard and protect the users, as well as the government and the data content. And I think from the way we have come, from how far we have come, it seems that we are a bit slower to catch up on the evolution, how the technology itself is evolving. So it's important for the individuals as well as the institution to be able to provide the policies and make the awareness, put out the awareness for users, particularly researchers and students, as early as possible, to be able to know exactly how much is too much.
I'm nodding a lot here. Yeah, can I add something to that?
Go for it, Maz.
So it feels like we're being thrown to the lions at the moment. So the policy on this end of things is everyone agrees internally that there should be a policy. How that policy is managed is it's up to department heads. Department heads then say, well, it's up to module leaders. Module leaders are not really given any guidance or scaffold around how something like this may work, even down to, and your experience may be different, and I really hope that it is, but a simple question or a relatively straightforward question from a student: which AI model can I use? Even that isn't, there's nothing really there at the institution level that provides guidance on that. And at the same time, so not only are we kind of like tipping over the edge of that, we have invested, at least on this side of things, heavily in Office 360. We've got Copilot that runs and sits on everything. If one wanted to opt out and not use AI, which one is legitimately allowed to do, one can't do that anymore. It's there, whether I like it or not. And it feels like we're being pushed in one direction over the edge of a cliff in terms of go and use these tools. Probably should have some regulation and legislation around how to use them. The current education policy isn't fit for purpose, but you go and find out what that is for us, okay, and come back to us. And then on the other side of things, hey, it's mandatory. that you're going to have to use this other tool, whether you like it or not. We're also not going to provide any guidance as to sort of where that's come from or why or how that could be best managed. And sort of, over to you. Good luck with that.
Absolutely. Joe was making an important point earlier that, whatever you upload, expect, you've got to be the sort of expectation that you've got to be happy for that to be in the public domain, more or less. But
not only that, but this morning, the news from Google and the experiences of Google Drive users that work within that partition is being, deleted or micromanaged on the side of Google, depending on the content of what it is that you're producing. So if they don't like it, it disappears, right?
Yeah. We're saying with the free services though, and the do you have kind of less comeback, or is that more likely to be you've got to take security more seriously than, for example, something like Copilot, Office 365, which organizations are paying money and licenses for? I mean, the Copilot kind of small print says don't put anything, don't upload anything to Copilot that you wouldn't, because, it could be subject to data breaches, etc.
Yep.
But you would think this is an institutional service like Outlook and email. You would absolutely put confidential information into that because you want to send confidential emails. But for some reason, Copilot is a little different. But I suppose the question is, can we trust Copilot more than we can trust some of the other ones that are free? Because in the end, it's an institutional system, technically. Is that not right?
I mean, technically it's an institutional system, but really what's the reality of the guardrails there, right? And the reason that the other ones are free. So I think, Google again as the example, there are other AI and tech companies. So they are making a freemium model for their premium pro Gemini AI soon. And that's going to be available to anyone with a academic email address, which sounds great, right? I mean, in terms of parity of access to those tools, brilliant. And then, well, why are they doing that? Because they need user data and user prompts and user experiences to better train their model. And yeah, I mean, to go back to your point about Copilot, can we trust that more than something that is a commercial model at the level of being open? Oh, I don't know. I'm very skeptical about it.
What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, I wouldn't.
That's a better answer.
No, I've had a look at the privacy policy things, and I'm not as overly convinced with it. The only real ones that throw me a little bit more is DeepSeek do an open source local version. So this is something that will run entirely on your local machine.
Right.
So I can disconnect the internet from it and then use it and then still have access essentially. And so I have a larger guarantee about where this data is going because it's on some physical machine that isn't wired in. But by and large, those sorts of models don't exist because they're hard to monetize. The fact that the DeepSeek put it up was quite a surprise at the time, and I know it threw OpenAI for a bit of a loop when they realized someone made a faster, quicker model and made it free, and you can just download it. But yeah, by and large, I don't trust a lot of these things.
So I suppose if we can get to the point where we've got something that we can trust more, e.g., it's not a black box belonging to a profit-driven company, then I suppose that we're still kind of waiting for something like that, I guess, aren't we? Like I don't know if JISC or Janet or one of the university bodies were to produce something to say this is okay to use, guys. We're not there yet, are we? I guess. Right, that's actually brought us to the hour mark, believe it or not. It's gone super quickly. So I'd just like to massively thank Joe for his talk and his time today. And Maz, thank you for joining us and really contributing some really interesting things to that debate. And as always, Toyosi, thank you so much for your input. So it's just the last thing to say then is just a quick reminder to register and put into your diary the other sessions. Have a look at Chester's other options, undergraduate and postgraduate. Follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube if you've not done so already, and make a social media post if you feel happy to do that. And then we'll see you for the next session 4, which is AI and transformation case studies with some great insights from academia and from industry as well. A quick comment there from Teddy, joined us last week. He says great insights. So thank you very much for that, Teddy. And thank you to you all. It's been great to see everybody, and I'll see you all soon.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Take care, everyone. Bye.